Hello, and welcome to video 2 of the Megan Simkus capstone banking app presentation. I wanted to dive a little bit further into authentication before we moved um, and talk about the two methods that I used for Authn. One I talked about was the JSON Web Tokens. The second one I considered and used, tried to use, was bcrypt to password hash. But you'll see in subsequent information and videos that I was unable to deploy using that methodology based on limitations in my computer and in my code. So what I'd like to do is show you first and share my screen. What I considered doing in my code in VS Code. Oh, okay, so in context.js, um, the auth provider was going to store tokens and use tokens here. And then in my authentication index.js, I was able to put constants for the JSON web tokens and for bcrypt and a constant for the doll. The doll has some issues right now, so I had to pivot into CodePen for my application and deploy it that way because I was unable to deploy using AWS as I was originally going to. Okay, so what I'd really like to talk about is database and API in this second part of the presentation. Um, the database used or considering being used was MongoDB. The data stored in that database is persistent. MongoDB is a persistent storage medium where the data that's ingested by the users in the UI of the application when they provide their email or their username or their password remains intact unless it's overwritten. To set this up, I chose to use Atlas DB um, on my local machine to connect to MongoDB. So I wanted to give an opportunity to show some of that at this point in time. I went into Atlas in order to start connecting to a cluster. And when the cluster didn't work, I tried connecting to a serverless um, instance in Robo3T. Neither one worked, unfortunately. What ended up happening in my case was that I was receiving errors that indicated e-timeout when connecting to MongoDB Atlas cluster. I performed research to understand my error better, and it indicated I needed to change my DNS config to public. I'm working on a work computer. Unfortunately, my own laptop or computer that's personal, and research into changing my DNS config to public indicated that was not a great idea. It's not very secure and it's against IETF protocol. So I did not follow that directive. But what I did do is, like I said earlier in this video, deploy to CodePen. The APIs that I was going to use or RESTful APIs, I was able to get that code into my VS Code, but I was not able to get that code into CodePen. I'll share my screen now. Should I have been able to deploy it, this is an example of the RESTful APIs that I was going to use. I will continue on further in the third video with more information and additional understanding of deployment features and reflection.